Nice to hear that. So welcome to this session this evening. My name's Lauren. I work as a development officer at Woodcraft Folk, mostly focusing on program and projects, lots of different projects that we're up to. And this evening, we're going to be talking about codes of conduct and group agreements, all around kind of working with young people, how we can keep each other safe, how we can keep our young people safe, and how we can really have in the forefront of our young people's mind, keeping the whole group safe, including kind of sharing their expectations of each other and of us as group leaders and as adults. So thank you all for joining us. And hello, Ingrid. Thank you.
Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us? Maybe you can't hear anything. Oh, I just said to Susan, sorry. This is where technology always fails us, where our wonderful video editors will come in useful. So I'm just going to carry on. And if no.
Can anybody hear me? Yeah. Oh. I don't have headphones. I might leave and come back in. Yeah, I'll do that again.
Perfect. I'll let Ingrid back in when she joins. She can't hear me saying that, but everybody else can. So tonight, what we're going to cover is looking at the sort of basic concepts of safeguarding, which is always good to remind ourselves of and remind each other of. We're going to look at group agreements, how we can make those group agreements with our young people and the groups that we work with. I really want to hear from everybody that's here, maybe what you've already done with your groups around group agreements, promoting good behaviour, and sort of making codes of conduct with our young people. We're going to talk about involving young people in decision making, and then we've got a few sources of support and a few reminders, safeguarding reminders that are always important to have in the front of our heads. So first of all, just a quick reminder of what is safeguarding. And when we talk about safeguarding, we mean protecting children from maltreatment, preventing impairment of children's health or development, ensuring that children are growing up in circumstances consistent with the provision of safe and effective care, and taking action to enable all children to have the best outcomes. So basically, at Woodcraft Folk, we just want to keep everybody as safe as possible and make sure that they're enjoying themselves and having the best outcome possible from our delivery and our youth work and all of the events and activities that we put on. And just a quick, again, reminder of what is child protection, and that child protection refers to the activity that is undertaken to protect specific children who are suffering or are likely to suffer significant harm, for example, when they've been referred somewhere. Child protection is part of safeguarding, but safeguarding is a lot wider, encompassing everything we do to keep children physically and emotionally safe. So that includes all our health and safety plans, all our risk assessments for everybody whilst they're partaking in our activities. Let's just let Ingrid back in, and hopefully that is a bit better for her this time. So first of all, we're going to talk about involving young people in our decision making. Before I come to that slide, I'm going to ask the group, because I like to have a bit of interaction. What do you do in your Woodcraft Folk groups to involve your young people, whether that be elfins, pioneers, venturers, or older, or even woodchips, in the activities that you do? So feel free to unmute yourselves or put it in the chat if that's better for you. Can you hear us this time, Ingrid? Anybody got any ideas of how they involve young people in their decision making in their groups?
Well, maybe I'll kick off, because we tried to have a bit of a program evening yesterday. It was much delayed because the Easter egg hunt in the food forest in the park took a lot longer, but we got it towards the end of the session, asking for ideas of what activities they'd like to do over the next, really between now and summer term, which in Scotland is not very long, and anything that they would feel like to have a kind of ground rules or agreements of what we do so that nobody feels uncomfortable or scared or upset by anything that goes on. And we try to get a few comments. Partly, there's my daughter who's the right age, my older son gets dragged along, and trying to separate the two of them from having digs at each other is one of the bigger challenges. That's what we did last night.
Perfect. That is the exact kind of thing that I was going to talk about. So that sounds really good. Are there any other ideas? Somewhere very noisy, that's okay. Catherine says that we try to offer child-led sessions supported by parents and try to be solution focused. Excellent. That sounds really good as well. So the things that I put down around involving young people in decision making, and that's going to be a really different experience for an elfin or even a wood chip right the way up to a venturer. So I like to think that we can discuss with all young people of all ages the kind of risk of what we may be doing, especially if we're out at a camp or if we're doing an activity outside, and also discussing with them safeguarding, not necessarily sitting and explaining to them every single safeguarding training that all of us have ever been to or sat through, but we can talk to them about keeping each other safe and why that's important. I like to kind of think of that if a young person wants to do something or a group of young people want to do something, really think about as an adult why you might say no to that. And I like to think that the correct answer is not to just say, oh, because I said so, or because, even as far as going because it's dangerous is not always necessarily enough of an answer. It's good to explain to the young people what the risks are of doing some things. And also that's good for us adults to then reflect on whether saying no is the right answer. If it's something like climbing a tree, maybe you make a compromise with the young people of how high in the tree they can climb, or how many of them can climb in the tree at a certain point, or something like that. Also, as Susan and Catherine both said, involving the group in program planning and discussing how that links with our aims and principles, but also discussing the kind of practicalities and making sure that it's safe and accessible for everybody in the group. Everybody in our groups will have different abilities, different access needs, so it's really important to think about how our activities are appropriate and whether they're accessible for everybody who comes to our group. And I also put down actively delivering sessions around communicating both in person and online and how to keep each other safe. Again, not sort of boring them with all the health and safety literature that necessarily as adults we sort of get a bit bogged down in, but talking to them about each activity that we're going to do. For example, if we're going to be making campfires with our young people, maybe running sessions around first aid of what to do if somebody does get burned, because it's not the end of the world if somebody has a minor burn. And these things do happen even to us adults who are like to think we're well trained in the health and safety department. So I think it's really important to actively deliver sessions, maybe doing a session before the campfire session around fire safety or around what to do if somebody happens to burn themselves or step in the fire or anything like that. Obviously, as I said before, that's going to be age appropriate. What we share with our elfins and how much risk we allow them to take is going to be very different to what we do with our venturers and how much responsibility and independence we give them. I like to also give the venturers in my district that I volunteer with a lot of independence in terms of planning our residentials and the activities that we do whilst we're away. And thinking about things like the menu for a camp can often bring up a lot of these things around safeguarding and risk, and talking about, you know, at the moment we've got one person in our district who's gluten-free, and even talking to the venturers about that sort of cross-contamination of wooden spoons and doing the washing up and the importance of that. And because it's somebody in their group, they feel a big ownership over keeping that person safe as well, because that's their friend, and you're not talking about something that's not right in front of them and that's not going to sort of affect them. So I think it's really important to do that. And I think it's important to do that, especially, as I say, with things like allergies. It's really easy to talk about why we don't bring nuts, for example, to group nights as a snack or something like that. So hopefully those things kind of sow some seeds into your head, adding on to what was already in there. So I hope that a group agreement is not a sort of new thing to many of you here, because it's something that Woodcraft Folk encourages each group to do, and to make a sort of treaty, an agreement, a code of conduct. I've heard many different names for this. Each group seems to have a different name, an agreement, a conduct. I heard a really great one earlier that I can't remember. Ground rules. There's lots of different ones. That could have been one of my questions, of how many different names can we think of for a group agreement. But I've just got these 3 questions that I'm going to throw out to you. So first of all, how do you usually make your group agreement? So Susan said that you did it yesterday. Did you just sit in a circle and talk about it? Did you sort of get moving and do something different?
It was really standing around in the park and talk, you know, we carried a big whiteboard.
Nice.
And we had some pens, and we carried, you know, my husband carried it up to the park. So, okay, folks, you know, it was like a shout out ideas for the program, and then shout out any comments of, you know, is there anything we would all want to sign up to? And just a mini brainstorm really towards the end of the session, because this was the first one after Easter.
Yeah, perfect. Are there any other ways that leaders, volunteers, groups have made their group agreements or come up with ideas for what to be included in their group agreement? That's okay if there aren't any other ways. I mean, it's really hard when you want to essentially sort of lay down the ground rules, especially with younger kids, I would say, like the Elfins and the Pioneers, to not do it in a way where you're not just kind of having a discussion, but there I often think that it's better to get into those kind of smaller groups or pairs and that kind of thing, to have those smaller conversations about, actually talk to each other. How would you like to be treated in this group, and how can we make sure that happens, and then come back together and share those ideas. And sometimes you then get ideas from those young people who are a bit shy to share in the bigger group. Obviously depends on how big your group is, and every group is slightly different. The next question might be different for everybody, but what usually comes out of making your group agreement, both in terms of what do the young people often put in their group agreement, or what do the adults want to put in the group agreement, and also whether you think this is an effective, whether people revisit this as they go through the term, or whether the young people make it and don't think about it again. If anybody has any thoughts of that. That's fine. I would say that usually when I've made group treaties, group agreements with young people, often what comes out of it is the kind of usual things, I guess, of let's all be kind to each other, and let's all not hurt each other. Sorry, Julie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, not hurt each other. In the Pioneers, we're actually not too bad. We've had a few wee hiccups because it's friends. Most of them are all in the same class at school, so sometimes class politics comes into the group. So I've had to kind of say, look, guys, you know, we're all friends, and what happens, and it tends to be that all the kids that come to the group are all friends, but it's like maybe the other ones that have been picking on them at school or that, and it all comes in, and we've got to say, look, no, we can't talk about people that are not here, and we can't, like, we've just got all to be friends. But the other group, Elfins, they've got a similar situation, but they're quite hitting each other and stuff, so they've had to put like a lot of boundaries and stuff in, just to say, look, can't do that, and having to ask for more volunteers just to deal. Some of the children have additional needs in that group, so I've been helping in that one as well just now, and it's just a wee bit difficult, and they agree on the rules, but then it's hard to get them to kind of agree all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that anybody who's worked with a group of young people can sympathise with rules. I say rules, but of let's say agreements being challenged or being broken as well. So I hope that some of the things that come out of this evening you can take away to your groups, and hopefully it will help with some things. Some things need a little bit more help, as you say. Maybe more volunteers will be useful with that. Maybe inviting some other people to the group who are not necessarily from the same school to kind of dilute it a little bit is also a good idea. But I think lots of groups have often a lot of young people from the same school, especially if the group meets in a school or close to a school, then that's often where you have a lot of young people coming in from. And I think that brings us nicely to the next one, which is what are the barriers or challenges when making your group agreement? And definitely one of those that I thought of is that young people and adults don't always stick to that group agreement, or it kind of goes out the window if other events crop up that were not expected. Thank you for sharing that though, Julie. Does anybody have any other kind of barriers or challenges when it comes to sort of making group agreements or sticking to group agreements? Catherine is saying that we haven't done a behavioural communication agreement for 2 terms I've been involved, and had quite a bit of talking over each other and adults, and some issues with equipment at venues, so planning to do one. Great, that's a great idea. It's a really good idea. Just to be able to, for the adults and the group leaders to be able to hold the young people accountable to what they sort of all agreed together that they want, how they wanted to be treated and how they wanted the group to be a safe place for them, but also a great place for the children to express their expectations of adults as well, and for us to make sure that we're sticking to that, because as an organisation, Woodcraft Folk is very passionate about empowering young people and giving them a space and an opportunity to stand up for when they think their children's rights are not being listened to, or when their sort of voice is not being heard. So I think it's really important to give them that space. Were you gonna say something, Mags?
I was just going to say, I'm moving into Pioneers with a young person, and I think there's been quite a lot of shifting recently. I think, in the pandemic, there wasn't so much movement between groups, and I think as we've come out of it, there's quite a bit of movement, certainly in our district, and you're nodding your head, so potentially in others as well. And so there's kind of new young people in groups, and a kind of shift in all of the groups, and new adults as well. And we've had some adults who are very experienced move from Pioneers to Venturers or Elephants to Pioneers. And so for me, I'm very much kind of keen to, I know that our Pioneers does need quite a lot of support and quite a bit of stability. We've got quite a few with additional needs as well. And so I think this is something that we haven't done, and be conscious that we had a planning session recently, but we kind of fallen out of involving the young people in it. And we did used to do it in the past, and we didn't recently. And I thought we actually do need to have a kind of some sort of group agreement, and instead of just planning the sessions, maybe we should plan that as well. But never too late, eh?
Definitely never too late. And I think it's really good that you're sort of reflecting on that, because definitely whilst we've been in and out of lockdowns, on and off of line, it's really difficult. I can remember meeting with my group online for the first time back in 2020 and going, okay, let's make an online group agreement. And then I think it was a really long time, as you say, since we until we actually revisited that and we were meeting back up in person, and that we should be treating the young people, and they should be treating each other and us in the same way, online and offline. We should always be treating each other with respect, and we should always be trying to cooperate the best we can, and we should always never be discriminatory against anybody. But sometimes, especially young people, and especially I say everybody actually, just always needs a little bit of a reminder. So it's always worth revisiting. So that's really great to hear from everybody. So things that I put down, sorry if this is a boring slide, I should have added in some nice pictures of young people cooperating together, but it's just a bit of a boring one. So I put down that this is the kind of things that I would maybe include in a group agreement with young people. So expectations, what do the young people expect from the adults? Make the group agreement a truly group agreement for everybody. How should everybody be treated? Some of those things might be individual in terms of I know that groups sometimes have expectations. Young people want for the adults maybe not to shout or to express themselves in a different way, and that's something that everybody can try to adhere to everything that's in the group agreement. Sometimes we're all going to fail, whether that's that we've made the agreement that we're not going to shout, but somebody loses control. These things happen. But I think that one of the most important things of having the group agreement, as I said before, is being able to be held accountable to the group agreement. And I think sometimes if you as we were just discussing, have a group agreement and don't come back to it for a very long time, then it's really hard to then say, oh, but remember, we all wrote down in our group agreement that we were going to respect each other. I think that, as Mag said, needs to be brought up into their minds all the time, so that they feel a little bit of ownership over how they should be behaving and how we all should be behaving when we're in the woodcraft folk setting. So I put down here expectations from young people for adults, that should say, and expectations from adults for young people. Put in treatment of others within the group and showing respect at all times. And I think that is really important, the at all times. So don't just show respect to each other whilst we're sitting in our news circle when we're playing our games, and then when you're on the way out, make a rude comment to somebody because the group's over and suddenly the group agreement doesn't count. And this sometimes can come up, especially with the older young people, in terms of maybe they are communicating with each other outside of the group, maybe through a WhatsApp group, maybe through a sort of Instagram Messenger group or something like that. And we should really be sort of creating this culture within our groups, that our groups are a safe space, and that friends that we make at Woodcraft Folk are safe friends to have, and that we're treating each other the same way, whether we're talking to each other in an online WhatsApp group where there's no adult present and it's just a group of friends talking, and also when we're in a group news circle at the beginning of our group night every week. Hopefully that makes sense. I think it's important to sort of share, get the young people to share how they feel about that as well. So ask it also, I've just put in 4 questions that we can ask young people when we're making our group agreement, and also ask our other group leaders as well. So what behavior is not acceptable at Woodcraft Folk, and why? As I said, always throw in a why. Why is it not acceptable really to be to be rude to each other, or to be to say hurtful things to each other? How can we challenge unacceptable behavior? I think this one's really important and can be very individual to each group. I think that young people within their group, especially when they have maybe known each other for a long time, or there are some new people coming in who they're getting to know, we realize that there are individual behaviors that are just part of some people's personality, or part of their additional needs, or part of their makeup. And sometimes there will be, which I put at the bottom here, individual exceptions where needed. So I know of a group, for example, who have in their group agreement, I think it's a group of elfins, they have in their group agreement that says, when we're in the news circle, everybody should sit down and listen to the news. They have one person in their group with additional needs who doesn't sit down, and just, that's not the way that they're made up. So they have in their group agreement that everybody should sit down and listen, apart from this one person who is allowed to walk around the room because that's what they need for their additional needs. And I think that young people can sometimes be the best at sort of making those individual exceptions. If one person then, as does sometimes happen with especially pioneers, pops up and says, oh, well, I should be allowed to eat a Mars bar at every group night, then put that out to the rest of the group. Okay, does everybody else agree that so-and-so should be allowed to eat a Mars bar at every group? Most likely the rest of the group will say no, will say no. And if they don't, and they think that that's within the sort of reasonable adjustment that's needed to be made for that person, then put it into your group agreement. And that's something, again, that you can always come back to and revisit regularly to update for those new people who come, or those people who are a bit flaky and come every 3 weeks and maybe weren't there in the week when you made it, and ask them, are there things that we should include? Oh, next week we're going to the park. Do we need a different group agreement for going to the park? It can be, as I think Susan said, just something at the end of a session that doesn't need to take up a whole session, just something that you revisit and check in with. And as I say, be able to hold accountable the young people to say, oh, we said that that was not an acceptable behaviour to have at Woodcraft Folk, but you're having that behaviour right now, can we turn it around? But also for the young people to, as I said before, say to us as adults, oh, I thought that we were always going to do our best to stay positive in the group, and you're telling us negative things, or something like that. And I think again, young people love nothing more than to tell adults when they think that they're doing wrong. So I think it's always nice to have that. And as an adult, I think there's nothing better than being able to stand up and sort of say, yeah, you're right. If you think that there needs to be an apology, say I'm sorry, and show that the agreement we can sometimes accidentally break, but we do our best to keep the group safe, to keep the group happy, and to keep the group cooperating and working together. So I've just put another question in there of what should we do if we're not happy with the way we're being treated. Talk with your group about, thinking about who they can go to within the group. So the group leaders, obviously, but are there any parents who are also members and volunteers but don't come that often, who maybe they can turn to if they see them at group night as well? Remind them that there are lots of trusted adults around that they can go to if they don't like the way they're being treated at the group or outside of the group as well. We talked about when we should revisit. I'm putting in that we should include parts of the risk assessment in this agreement. So if, for example, we're going to a camp, excuse me, and we've put into the risk assessment that the elfins shouldn't be, or the younger elfins shouldn't be in the kitchen because it's not safe for them to be around, for example, a pan of sausages that might be spitting lots of oil out, then explain that to the elfins and put that into your group agreement, that if you are making a group agreement with a group of elfins, that part of that agreement is that they're not going to go into the kitchen unless they're supervised by an adult. And if they need somebody who's in the kitchen, come up with an agreement of how they can knock on the door or shake the tent or something of how they're going to get that attention. Try and think outside the box of ways that you can include young people in that risk assessing, and also making that part of the agreement that you're all agreeing to adhere to. So I've put there that it's really great to have an agreement for your elfin group, your pioneer group, your venturer group, but when we go to camps or residentials, sometimes that's with our whole district, and so we might be with different age groups and different people who we're not normally with on a group night. So it might be appropriate to create a separate group agreement for camp, and that could include, again, things like bedtimes, things that are often a sort of a conversation that should be had with young people, but it's not always had with young people. So maybe before the camp or residential, talk to the elfins. What do they think is an appropriate bedtime? Talk to the elfins. What do they think is an appropriate time to brush their teeth? Or how many biscuits do they think is it appropriate for each elfin to have a day? Bring it down to their level of the kind of things that actually we can make an agreement on this. And then if constantly all day the elfins are asking, when is it biscuit time? You can remind them of the group agreement that we said we were going to have biscuits at 3 every day, and it's not 3 o'clock yet, or so, whatever it is that you make in your agreement. So those are just some ideas. And as I said, young people are good at making individual exceptions where they think is needed, and of recognizing the other needs of the people in their group as well, especially if they've known each other for a little while. So just again, a reminder that group agreement should be for the whole group. So you're getting everybody into that circle or into that space, and you're making an agreement with the young people. And it's really important that it's with the young people and the group leaders. And it's not the group leaders telling the young people how they should behave, but equally it's not the young people telling the group leaders how they're going to behave. So it needs to be together. And part of the young people and us as adults being able to take ownership of the agreement is being able to call people out if they're not adhering to it. So it's when I run my pioneer group, I like to keep our group agreement in the group folder, so I can constantly be turning back to it if I need to and tell them which parts I think we need to have a think about. And equally, they can ask me to whip it out if they want to tell me that I'm not doing something appropriately. So just a couple of examples of activities that you can find on our website around creating a group agreement and setting expectations and having a think about behavior. So the first one is called creating a group treaty, which is all around, just like we were just saying, discussing with the young people and writing down on a big piece of paper what our group treaty, or our group agreement or our code of conduct or whatever we're calling it is going to involve, and it's got some great ideas on there. The second one is called Do You Agree? And this activity asks the young people, if it's going to load on my screen, ask the young people a set of different statements, and they have to go to different sides of the room to say whether they agree with the statement or disagree with the statement. this is a really good activity to do kind of before you create your group agreement. So looking at things like, is it okay to be left out? Hopefully most young people disagree with that. So maybe then when you come to making your group agreement, you can talk about some of these statements, ask the young people how they felt about these statements, and then include some of those things into their group agreement. And you could put in some other statements that you can think of as well that maybe are more specific to the group. So this activity is all around sort of bullying and trying to sort of change bullying behavior, or kind of call out bullying behavior that's going on in a group setting. So if I just back here. So there are some other activities on the website that are around anti-bullying as well. So if you just type in anti-bullying into the search bar, you should find a couple more there as well. So if you're having any trouble with that sort of thing in your group, then you can have a look at some of those activities too. So I put here to include venturers in risk assessment, but not necessarily appropriate for Elfins, which we said before. Have a think about what who your group are, what they're made up of. All groups are different. There might be some really switched on pioneers who are ready to hear about risk assessments and why certain things are risky or carry more risk, and how we can omit some of that risk. And some venturers might not necessarily be ready to hear the full risk assessment and just want to be involved in some of those smaller decision making that we discussed before. So as a group leader, hopefully you know your group best of what fits for them and what's appropriate to do with them. So I'm just going to talk quickly about linking all of this back to our aims and principles, which again can be very helpful when we're looking for activities to do with our group around making group agreements, talking about codes of conduct, or talking about working together, and in some cases living together. When we're at camp, we are cooperatively, communally living together, and so it's really important to have a group agreement so everybody understands what the expectation of them is. So one of the aims and principles that all of this relates to, and having a code of conduct and a group agreement, is obviously around cooperation. So working together to create, as I said before, that sort of safe culture. So not just a safe space, but especially moving from Elfins through to pioneers and through to venturers. As somebody said, suddenly everybody's moved up a group over the pandemic, and maybe last time they came to a summer camp, I know we're coming up to common ground, but for some of these young people, last time they came to a summer camp, they were an Elfin. Now they're coming to the next summer camp as a pioneer. Some of them even, you know, going from pioneer to a venturer, or going from a venturer to a DF, and it's always good to sort of check back in around that. How can we be cooperative, keep everybody safe, and kind of work together to make our world a better place? Also, I guess you could argue most importantly on this topic is our aim and principle around children's rights. So young people under the age of 18 have a whole multitude of different rights, which include the right to be listened to, the right to be respected, the right for their rights to be respected. They have the right to have their say, and for that to, as I say, be listened to. They have the right to information and freedom of information, which includes things like risk assessments and sharing with them what the health and safety rules are in an age appropriate way. So exploring these rights with your young people and doing activities around children's rights, again, which there are loads of on the website. You can help your young people understand what they should expect from others, how they should be treated, and how they can call out when they think their rights are not being met or listened to at the group. Hopefully they do feel like their rights are being listened to, but it's always good to give them some groundwork of how they can make change if they should need to. I also put in education for social change, because we really want to encourage young people to call out any behavior that doesn't seem appropriate or doesn't fit right with them. We want them to be able to talk with trusted adults like us, group leaders, and other people working with the group. We want for them to be able to support each other online and offline. And most importantly, what Woodcraft Focus is all about, spanning the world with friendship. So we really want to encourage young people that as a group, as a pioneer group, as a venture group, as a district, and as a movement, we all have loads of common values, and that's what this summer is all about, standing on common ground. So sometimes the group agreements can just be reminding young people what that common ground is, what our common values are, what our aims and principles are and what we're at Woodcraft folks trying to achieve, which is mostly having fun, staying safe, and also exploring the world around us. So just a quick question that I'm going to throw out there: how do you promote good behavior in your group? And good behavior can be an interesting term, so I'll leave that up to you to decipher. But how do you promote good behavior and sticking to the group agreement, I guess, in your group, if you have any ideas?
I know when we were doing elephants, it felt slightly easier. We certainly would talk about, the kind of agreements and the ethos of Woodcraft. At news time, when we'd go around the circle, we'd kind of do a little reminder, in terms of, listening to each other and, not talking over and stuff like that. So that felt relatively easy.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. I think that that's a good point. I think news, especially for elephants, news time can be a really good kind of development tool of helping young people learn how to wait for their turn in the circle, which is all around kind of cooperation and sharing as well, which is really important at Woodcraft folks. So I think news time, although some of the elfers might find it difficult sometimes to wait for their turn, I think that they are learning that when it comes to their turn, they will be listened to and their views will be respected, and that's really important as well.
Sorry, just to add, one of the things I think is important is the venue. So it's really different when you're inside, or the environment that you're in, and certainly the groups that I've been involved in, we have met in schools, and that hasn't necessarily helped because it's a different environment, and some of the young people are used to a different environment in a school, and some of the school staff are used to a different expectation from young people than Woodcraft. So certainly we've kind of moved away from meeting in a school.
Yeah, no, that's a really valid point. And I think that, again, coming back to what we were saying about the sort of pandemic and people meeting online, I think most groups went from meeting online to meeting outside. And that's very different. Both of those kind of two extremes of meeting online where you're in your space and you can only see your screen and all of that, then to going to the massive park where even kind of shouting Woodcraft folk can be quite difficult, or getting everybody to come back when you're playing a game or something like that. So I think we almost kind of missed that sweet spot in the middle where we could make our group agreement inside and we could kind of get back into the flow of things. So I think, really valid point there around sort of different spaces and young people having different expectations, especially if you're meeting in a school that some of the young people go to themselves. It can be different behaviors going on, either them thinking, oh, this is great, I'm in school and it's not school time, and letting loose, or kind of thinking, oh, I'm at school, I need to keep my school persona on. So I think that can kind of go both ways. So that's really important to think about. I would say that although it seems like, I don't want anybody to go away thinking that at Woodcraft Folk all we do is make group agreements, but we can definitely think about group agreements in each activity that we do. And I like to say at the end of each week, kind of let the kids know what we're doing next week, or let them know the kind of whole program in advance. But sometimes, as I said before, it can just be a conversation at the end of the group, even something as small as next week we're going to be using whittling knives. Make sure that everybody wears sensible shoes. That in itself is actually keeping everybody safe. That in itself is a group agreement that if somebody turns up without the sensible shoes, unless there's obviously a reason that they don't have the sensible shoes or that they need to borrow some sensible shoes, that actually that in itself, that's part of the agreement of doing the activity. And I think sometimes that's really important for young people, obviously with a little reminder to parents and carers, but for young people to learn that being part of a group and sort of taking that part of the responsibility has to be to sort of making these agreements and listening to each other and adhering to them. And I don't like to call them, I think calling it a group agreement or a treaty or a code of conduct is different to calling it the rules, even though quite a lot of these things will be viewed as rules. I think it's really important that the young people have had their say of what should be in these rules or what should be in this agreement. And then I think they're much more likely to sort of take ownership and stick with what they've put down. And again, regularly revisit that, because something in September that might be a rule because it's getting dark and all of those things, when July comes around and the summer is here, might be a different rule. We might put things later, we might have later bedtimes at camp, or a different sort of rule. So always revisiting those group agreements as much as possible, I think, is useful. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add around group agreements or promoting good behaviour within our groups? Yeah, Catherine. Go Catherine, then Ingrid.
Sorry, I hope you can hear me all right. It's something about, we've got such a massive group. We've got 40 kids in our venturers at the moment, and we are going to look, I think, about getting like youth workers in or something different. I'll maybe speak to you separately, Lauren, about that, because it's and we're parents of the teenagers, and I just don't think they want to be led by their own parents, however the agreements are and things like that. And I think you can see that in Elfin. So that's a separate point I'd probably just like to nobble you with at some point.
That's
all right.
That's absolutely fine.
But I totally think everything you said is enormously helpful, and we're going to start to do that in the next couple of weeks. But when you've got 30 or 40 kids in one venue, it can be quite challenging just to keep them not talking over each other in news and stuff like that.
Definitely. And I think that when you've got a group of that many, then that is a real endurance test of waiting for your turn of news. So maybe I would suggest having like different news circles, so some people hear some people's news and some people hear other people's news, just so that you kind of split that up a bit. But we could definitely talk about that offline. Feel free to drop me an email or call anytime. But yeah, when you've got a big group, it's really difficult again, because talking over each other, I guess, is quite a big thing that happens in all groups, and sometimes it's the adults as well that are talking over the young people. And once a young person's seen an adult talking over somebody, then they might think that that's sort of the go ahead to do that. And as adults, we do that. We go, oh, I'm just telling another group leader something really quickly, so I'm just going to let it in. But we should always try to model our behaviour, which is really difficult sometimes. Ingrid, what were you going to say? Sorry, I just interrupted you.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about. Got something too close to the screen. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, sorry, Ingrid. But yeah, it is difficult. I was just going back to what I was saying before, that it is difficult when you have a very large group, and it's amazing to have that many young people who want to come and be part of Woodcraft Folk, but then you think, actually, what do I do? What do I do with this many young people? And there are lots of things that you can do. You just need a little bit of planning, so we can definitely pick that up, I think. Julie, were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah, we've got about 20, and I find that I can't believe 40. I find 20 difficult sometimes. We do the talking hat. One of the leaders actually came with a hat on, and she said, right, this is the talking hat, and anybody that takes this hat, that's their time to talk in the news. And it worked well, and they had good fun. Some of them were trying the hat on, and some of them were just giving their hat to their friends and stuff, and that worked well to hold their attention. Because we've got quite a lively bunch, so they all get on quite well, which is good, but they're quite lively, so they enjoyed doing that, and we felt that held their attention. But we tell them one piece of news each, and so make it count, because because we've got a lot in the same school, in the same class, we get so many. Mrs. So-and-so did this today, and So we just have to try and kind of limit it to one, which will feel bad sometimes, but because it's such a big group, you would be there all day.
No, completely understand that. Sometimes I've been in such a big group that I've just said, right, we're going to go around and say one word that describes our week. It doesn't even have to be anything, like just one word that says something about your week, just because, as you say, otherwise your whole session is just taken up with news, which I think is a really important part of the session. And young people don't actually get as much time as we think to share what they've done with other people. They don't really get that chance at school. So I think news is really important. And as I say, sometimes it's nice to just put them into groups of 3 or 4 and say, share your news with these people, and don't go in a group with, like you say, somebody who goes to your school, or try not to go in a group with people who go to your school. I did a great session, which was actually with adults, but it could definitely work with young people as well recently, where I gave everybody 4 tokens, 4 pieces of paper, but I called them tokens. And then I said, here's your talking tokens, a bit like the speaking hat, the talking hat that somebody else just mentioned, but it kind of stops the same people. And sometimes you can have some very kind of loud members of the group who are always happy to share, and then have the more kind of shy members of the group who take a bit longer to share, or are not comfortable sharing in a big group. So sometimes if you've got maybe just 1 or 2 talking tokens each, then they can, as you say, use them wisely, but it kind of encourages those who don't always share in those bigger groups to use their token and share something about their week, or something like that. Ingrid's saying, just wanted to ask about when the children first come in and they're a bit wild before everyone arrives in the pioneers. So that is definitely a thing. What I normally do in that situation when we're waiting, sometimes I'll think of a game that the group can start off with just one person, whether that's like a stuck in the mud kind of game, but really to get out some of that running around energy. And then once 2 of them are there, they can start playing, and then something that most of the group will know how to play. So not a really complicated game, but something that straight away when people can join up, people can join in when they come in. You can say, oh, put your coat down here, join in with stuck in the mud, or, you know, put your water bottle down and go and join in, is what I usually do in that situation. Does anybody else have any good games that are good for that start of the session? I sometimes, if there's only a couple as well, ask them to do really boring jobs like fill up the water jug, or pioneers really like, I think, well, my pioneers really like to feel like they're responsible. So getting the cups out, our venue, we've got a kitchen, so get the cups out, get the jugs out, get the water out. Sometimes if there's one who's very early, I'll say, okay, you can take the register, or something like that. That gives them, also encourages them to be a bit early. Mag said that they used the talking stick before, and maybe need to get back into that. I think all of those kind of little tradition, they can become a tradition within the group. And I think sometimes, again, that's about taking ownership, and maybe you could have a session where you, I don't know, vote on the best talking stick, or design the best talking stick, or the talking hat, or something like that. And I think especially for Elkins and Pioneers, that definitely works to give them a bit of ownership over, that's our group's talking stick. And so I really want to hold that, and I'm going to respect the person who's holding that. I think with venturers, it can take a little more persuading, but we can get there, and there are really good techniques and ways that we can do that. I'm aware that we're getting to nearly 7 o'clock, which is great. We've been here nearly a whole hour, but just a couple of safeguarding reminders to pass on. That if you're ever concerned about a child or young person that is part of your Woodcraft Folk group, or any young person that you come across, you're more than welcome to contact safeguarding@woodcraft.org.uk. That email address is monitored pretty much all the time by around 4 people on the safeguarding board. So there's always somebody, hopefully, who can pick up your email quite quickly and get in touch. It's really important that we always share with our local safeguarding leads, and where appropriate with Owen, the national safeguarding lead, and record all concerns, no matter how small they are. Just make a record of it, so that if something else comes up in the future with the same young person, you can remember, and others in the district can remember that happened as well. Make sure that everyone in the group and district knows who the safeguarding lead is. This is a really small way that we can involve our young people in risk assessing, in group agreements, in making decisions, in keeping everybody safe, is making sure that even the elfins know where they can go to if they want to report something. We don't need to necessarily, as I said before, use all of those big words and safeguarding speak that we all know very well, but we can talk to them about who the trusted adults are in the group and who they can go to if they have any concerns or worries, or if anything's made them feel upset or hurt in any way. And just also a reminder that all volunteers should, where possible, take part in basic safeguarding training, either with their local council or on the NYA, the National Youth Agency website. There's sorry, lost my train of thought. There is a volunteer youth sector safeguarding training level 1, and if you need any help finding that, just drop me an email or get in touch with safeguarding email anytime. So I've just put on here one source of support, although the Woodcraft Folk website safeguarding portal is a really great source of support as well. But if you go onto the National Youth Agency website, they have quite a lot of information on there about group management. Some of that is around managing volunteers, which is also really important and something that we need to do at Woodcraft Folk. And some of it's about keeping our group safe and happy and talking with the young people about how we can do that. So as well as the Woodcraft Folk resources, the NYA have some bits out there as well. Does anybody have any final questions before I let everybody go and have some dinner or enjoy their evening or whatever they're doing?
It's really useful, on. Thank you. Not a question, comment.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. Thank you. It's been really nice to see everybody. If anybody does have any questions at any time, I'm going to put my email in the chat. And Catherine, if you want to get in touch and we can have a chat at some point, if I can spell Woodcraft, that would help. But my email is really easy. It's just lauren@woodcraft.org.uk, which does still come through to me. So if anybody has any questions, wants to just have a chat, I'm work full time, I'm always at my desk. So give me an email anytime, and my phone number is on the bottom of my email too. So thank you everybody for coming. It's been a pleasure. Just had previous screen NYA. Yeah, let me go back to that, Ingrid, 1 second. I can put that in the chat as well, actually. Maybe. Hang on. No, I can't because I'm in slideshow mode. You can just copy it down. But thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you all some point in the near future, and have a lovely Tuesday evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Perfect. Have a good evening.